Hi, it's Chuck again, back with part 2 of making a refrigerant, a behind-the-scenes look. If you haven't caught part 1 yet, I suggest you pause here and jump out, review part 1, and then you can come back here and see part 2. But in part 2, we're going to talk to some of our scientists, our toxicologist Christine and Patrick, who runs our flammability testing laboratory. Flammability and toxicology are two of the important data packages that go into developing a new refrigerant, particularly when we get into ASHRAE standard 34, where refrigerant numbers are assigned in safety classifications. So I hope you find this information helpful. You see some of the science that goes behind our products. And again, stay tuned. Part 3 will be coming. We'll talk a little more about our applications, training, and some of the systems work we do with our refrigerants. So somewhere in the middle of the timeline between we first start the basic research and discovery of a new refrigerant and it's commercialized and you can buy it at a wholesale supplier near you, we go through the process of an ASHRAE submission. That's where we submit data and information to ASHRAE Standard 34 Committee and get a number assigned. That's where the R407 numbers, the R449, those are all assigned by going through the ASHRAE Standard 34 process. Two important parts of the data that need to be submitted for that process have to do one with the toxicity and one with the flammability. So we want to hear from our toxicologist here to talk a little bit about the toxicology science and data that's needed to assure that we have safe, good refrigerants when we come out the end of the development cycle.
Hi. My name is Christine Glatt, and I'm a senior toxicologist at the Chemours company. I'd like to talk to you briefly about why toxicology is so important in the refrigerant product development process at Chemours. What toxicology does is it ensures that the products that you use are safe to you, are safe to your customers, and are safe to the planet. Our toxicology team is fully integrated into the entire process of product development at Chemours, from research and development all the way through full commercialization. And what this does is that it ensures that product safety is embedded in all of the decisions and actions that take place through this product development process. Safety is critical to the sustainability of our products at Chemours, and most importantly, in retaining your trust as our customers. Toxicology is the study of the adverse effects that chemicals and agents play on living organisms. So we do many things to help us understand what those adverse effects are. We use various protocols that have been scientifically validated, they're robust, and they're internationally accepted. And very importantly, consider animal welfare in their design. Our team designs very tiered strategies that start with computational modeling, which means that we use computer simulations and models to understand the toxicity, through to in vitro models, which include cell-based systems or in vitro, like I mentioned, as well as whole body or in vivo animal models to understand and characterize the toxicity of a substance. What's also important to understand and characterize the toxicity of a substance is to look at various levels of exposure, durations of exposure, and routes of exposure. So for example, various durations of exposure might include acute or short-term, single 1-hour inhalation exposures or single oral dosing, through to subacute or subchronic, which means 28 or 90-day exposures, all the way through to exposures that simulate a lifetime of a human exposure. Various endpoints are evaluated in these studies. They include things such as clinical observations, central nervous system effects, reproductive effects, endocrine effects, developmental effects, whole tissue and organ histopathology, effects on DNA, and also effects on cancer. All of these taken together are used to characterize the critical hazards that a substance has on a living organism. They support the international chemical regulatory submissions, and then together with regulators and third-party body experts, we use this information along with the information that we have on exposure to the humans and environments that are exposed to the substances to create a risk assessment so that we can ensure that workers and the general public are safe in using our products. Other downstream uses of toxicology data include things such as community and workplace exposure limits, such as ATELs, and occupational exposure limits, such as wheels and TLVs. Other things include classification and labeling for hazard communication, as well as health-based codes and standards that are used by ASHRAE and ISO. So the benefits to you in toxicology testing. Well, I would think that the number one benefit to you from a Chemours product is that you have peace of mind. Peace of mind that the products that you and your customers are using are safe for your health and safe for the environment. As the father or founder, I should say, of modern toxicology once said, and his name is Paracelsus, solely the dose determines that a thing is not a poison. What he means by this is that all things at some concentration or exposure are poisonous, and that at other exposures or concentrations are not poisonous. It is our job as toxicologists to identify what that level of safe exposure is. Our passion at Chemours is safety and delivering sustainable products that meet this criteria personally makes my job that much more satisfying. So in closing, where you can find information on the safety of our products, the safety data sheet or SDS, and on the websites of the European Chemical Agency or the National Library of Medicine. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so we're here with Patrick Coughlin at the Chemours Discovery Hub. It's our R&D center where all our development and testing work for Opteon and Freon refrigerants goes on. And Patrick runs our flammability testing facility. And so I've asked him to talk a little bit about one of the more basic flammability tests in the refrigerants industry, which basically leads to how refrigerants get classified when it comes to flammability to the standard. So Patrick, can you kind of describe the apparatus here that we're going to look at?
Certainly. Thank you, Chuck.
And the test, assume? Sorry.
Certainly. The test that we run here to determine the upper and lower flammability limits of a refrigerant and air is based on the ASTM E681. At its heart, what we use is a 12-liter flask and a sample. The sample can be either a pure refrigerant or a blend of refrigerants. What will be done is we will slowly introduce the sample from a liquid composition and expand it into a suitable container, i.e. this flask, up to a desired concentration in air. In this instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, etc. The idea being that we're trying to find any instance in that air where this mixture suddenly becomes flammable. Once the sample is flown in, we of course introduce air. This test method can be used for both ASHRAE applications or ISO applications, the difference being whether it's moist air or dry reconstituted air. In both instances, a substance is considered flammable only if it ends up having a degree of arc over 90 degrees from its point of ignition. If we ignite it down here, the flame must travel up and then expand out to be 90 degrees. Anything over 90 degrees is considered flammable. At that point, we would either consider it the LFL, or the lower flammable limit, or the upper flammable limit. However, if it happened to be less than 90, this would be considered non-flammable. The reason being that in a real-world environment, that flame would no longer be able to continue to propagate. Anything above 90, and it would.
Thanks for that description. I think, can we go down to the lab and take a look at the actual apparatus as it is in real life at this point?
Absolutely.
All right. So as part of the ASHRAE standard process to get an ASHRAE designation and number, the ASHRAE designation is A1, B1, A or B being the toxicity number, and then 1, 2, 2L, or 3 being the flammability characteristic. So 1 being essentially non-flammable or no flame propagation. 3, that includes things like hydrocarbons, propane, things that are highly flammable or explosive. Then there's the 2 or the 2L that's in the middle. The 2L are sometimes referred to as mildly flammable. But getting back to the standard, we not only have to show the proper classification testing for the refrigerant as it's formulated as we put it in the jug, but also if it leaks or can change composition, we have to understand what levels, if it's multi-component, the flammable components are going up or down to assure that it's safe and meets that flammability classification under any type of use scenarios. So that involves 2 of our laboratories. We've seen one, our analytical laboratory, where we can do these leak and formulation scenarios and verify what the composition ends up being, and then 2, our flammability testing of those worst case mixtures. So you see how a couple of our laboratories contribute to work together in order to get the refrigerant assigned an ASHRAE number and a safety classification.